Story 1. It started on a quiet night. I had just finished a late shift and was driving back to my apartment in a small town outside Columbus, the kind of place where everything shuts down early and the streets feel almost too empty after midnight. At first, everything felt calm, almost peaceful, like nothing could possibly go wrong. But then I noticed headlights behind me. At first, it didn't feel strange, just another car on the road, except they stayed behind me longer than they should have. I turned onto another street. They turned too. That's when I started paying attention. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe they just lived nearby. But something about the way they kept the same distance, not too close, not too far. It felt deliberate. Who does that? I told myself I was overthinking it, even laughed a little to shake it off, but my hands tightened on the steering wheel without me realizing. Then I made another turn, and so did they. Now it didn't feel normal anymore. There was this quiet pressure building in my chest, like my body had already figured something out before my mind did, and I kept checking my mirror again and again, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. But I wasn't. The car was still there. Same distance, same speed. That's when I made a decision that, looking back, probably saved me. Instead of going straight home, I drove past my street without signaling, just kept going, because something felt wrong, and I didn't want whoever was behind me to know where I lived. There was a gas station a few blocks ahead, still open, lights bright against the darkness, and I remember thinking, if I just get there, I'll be fine. But then the car sped up, not aggressively, just enough to close the gap, and my heart dropped, because now there was no doubt. They were following me. You know that moment when everything suddenly becomes real, when all the small doubts disappear, and you're left with one clear, terrifying thought? This isn't a coincidence. I pressed harder on the gas, trying to stay calm, telling myself not to panic, but my breathing was already getting heavier. I pulled into the gas station, and the car followed, slowly, almost casually, like they didn't care if I noticed anymore. I parked right near the entrance where the lights were strongest, where I could see people inside, and for a second I just sat there gripping the wheel, trying to decide what to do. Do I go inside? Do I call someone? Do I wait? Then I looked in the mirror, and I saw the driver's door open. That's when everything changed. A man stepped out. I couldn't see his face clearly at first, just his silhouette under the harsh white lights, but something about the way he moved, slow, controlled, like he wasn't in any rush at all, made it worse. He started walking toward my car, not fast, not aggressive, just steady, like he already knew I wasn't going anywhere. Why wasn't I moving? Why was I just sitting there? I still ask myself that. Maybe I froze. Maybe my brain was trying to process too much at once, but all I could do was watch him get closer, step by step, until I could finally see his face. And he was smiling, not a normal smile, not friendly. It was off, like he was enjoying the moment. Then he raised his hand slightly, not waving, not signaling, just lifting it, like he was about to knock on my window. That's when something inside me snapped. I locked the doors, threw the car into reverse, and backed out faster than I should have, tires screeching slightly, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And for a split second, I saw his expression change. The smile disappeared completely, like a switch had flipped. That terrified me more than anything else, because it felt like I had just interrupted something he had planned. I didn't stay to find out. I drove straight out of that gas station, took random turns, barely thinking, just trying to put distance between me and him. For a while, I thought I lost him. The roads were empty again, no headlights, nothing, just silence. And I remember thinking, maybe it's over. But then I stopped at a red light, and slowly, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Same distance, same car. My stomach dropped. How? I hadn't gone home. I had taken different turns. I hadn't even driven in a straight line. So how was he still there? That's when the fear changed. It wasn't just panic anymore. It was something colder, because now it felt like, no matter what I did, he wasn't going to stop. The light turned green and I didn't wait. I drove faster this time, heading toward the nearest police station I could think of, barely remembering the route, just following instinct, hoping this would finally end it. And somewhere along the way, the headlights disappeared. Just like that. Gone. No turn, no warning, nothing. I kept driving anyway. I didn't stop until I reached the station and parked right outside, hands shaking, trying to catch my breath, scanning everything around me to make sure I was alone. And I was. At least, it looked that way. I never saw that car again, never saw that man again. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, and I notice headlights behind me that stay just a little too consistent, I feel that same tightness in my chest, that same quiet warning, and I can't help but wonder, if I had gone home that night, would he have followed me all the way there? Would he have knocked on my door instead of my window? Or worse, would he have just walked in? I still don't know what he wanted, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. Story 2. I don't know when it started exactly, and that's what bothers me the most, because when you can't pinpoint the beginning, it makes you wonder how long it had already been happening without you noticing, how many nights something was there, before you finally paid attention. It was a normal apartment complex just outside Phoenix, quiet, nothing unusual, the kind of place where people mind their own business and don't ask questions, which at the time felt comforting. But now, looking back, that silence feels different, like it was hiding something. At first, it was just a feeling. You know, that subtle, uncomfortable awareness, like you're being watched, even when you're alone. I told myself it was nothing, just stress, long work days, lack of sleep. But then I started noticing something that didn't fit. Every night, around the same time, there were footsteps outside my door. Slow, measured, not passing by, not rushing anywhere, just pacing, back and forth. At first, I ignored it. Apartments have noise, right? Neighbors move around, floors creak. It happens. But this was different, because it wasn't random. It was consistent. Same time, same rhythm, and always, right outside my door. That's when I checked the peephole. Nothing. Empty hallway. I even opened the door slightly once, just to be sure. No one there. That should have been enough to calm me down, but it didn't, because I had heard it. Clear, close, real. So where did they go? The next night, it happened again. Same time, same slow pacing. But this time, I didn't open the door. I just stood there, watching through the peephole, barely breathing, waiting. And then, it stopped, right outside my door. Not fading away, not moving on, just stopping. Like whoever it was knew exactly where I was standing. My chest tightened, and for a moment everything went completely silent, until I heard something soft, almost too soft to notice. A faint brushing sound, against the door. That's when it stopped feeling normal. Who does that? Who stands outside someone's apartment in the middle of the night, and touches the door like that? I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there, frozen, hoping it would go away. And eventually, it did. The footsteps came back, slow and steady, walking away like nothing had happened. That should have been enough for me to report it, but I didn't, because part of me still wanted to believe it was nothing. That was my mistake. The nights that followed, it kept happening. Same time, same pacing. And every single time, it would stop right outside my door. Not for a second, but long enough to feel intentional, like they were checking, like they were waiting. Then one night, it changed. The footsteps didn't move on. They stayed. Longer than usual. Too long. I was sitting in my living room, with the lights off, TV muted, just listening, counting seconds in my head, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But then I heard something that made my stomach drop instantly. A soft metallic sound. Right at the door. The handle. It was moving, slowly, carefully, like someone was trying not to make noise. And in that moment, something clicked in my mind, something cold and clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't harmless. Whoever this was, they were trying to get in. I couldn't move. I just stared at the door, waiting for it to open, heart pounding so hard it felt loud in the silence. The handle stopped after a few seconds, and everything went still again. Then, a whisper, so faint I almost convinced myself it wasn't real, but I heard it, right there, on the other side of the door. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone. Low, calm, like someone speaking quietly, maybe to themselves, or maybe to me. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually the footsteps came back, slow, controlled, walking away again. But this time, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like something unfinished. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I checked the hallway. Nothing, no signs, no damage, nothing to prove what I heard, except right near the bottom of the door, there was a small scratch, fresh, thin, like something metal had dragged across it. That was enough. I spoke to the building manager later that day, asked if anyone else had reported anything strange, any complaints, any incidents. He said no, nothing like that had ever happened. But then he paused, just slightly, and that pause told me everything. I asked about the previous tenant. He hesitated again, then said they moved out suddenly. No notice, left things behind. That was it. No explanation. But who just leaves like that? That night, I didn't stay. I packed what I needed and left, stayed with a friend across town, and for the first time in days, there were no footsteps, no sounds, just silence, normal silence. But a few days later, I went back during the day to grab the rest of my things. Everything looked fine, too fine, like nothing had ever happened, and for a moment, I almost believed it, until I opened the door. There were marks on the floor, faint, but clear enough if you looked closely, right near the entrance, in the same spot, over and over again, like someone had been standing there repeatedly, facing the door from the inside. I just stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense, because if someone had been outside all those nights, then who was inside? I didn't stay long after that. I left everything else behind and never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I still think about those footsteps, that pacing, that waiting, and that whisper, right on the other side of the door. I still don't know who it was, or how long they had been there. Story 3. I still replay that night in my head, trying to figure out when it actually started, because there wasn't a single moment where everything changed, just a series of small things that didn't feel right at the time, things I ignored, and now I wish I hadn't. I was driving through a quiet stretch of road just outside Portland, the kind of road that feels endless at night, surrounded by trees, no street lights, just your headlights cutting through the dark. It was late, I was a little tired, music playing low, and there were no other cars around, at least, not at first. And honestly, that part didn't bother me. What bothered me came next. I saw him on the side of the road. At first, he was just a shape in the dark, barely visible until my headlights hit him, a man standing completely still, not waving, not asking for help, not even shifting his weight, just standing there. That should have been enough to keep driving without thinking twice. But something about the way he was positioned, facing the road, waiting, it felt intentional. I slowed down just a little, not enough to stop, just enough to see him clearly, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. He wasn't looking at the road, he was looking straight at me, not at the car, not at the lights, at me. I told myself it was just shadows, just my mind playing tricks, but as I passed him, just for a second, our eyes met, and he smiled, not a big smile, not exaggerated, just small, calm, like he knew something I didn't. I kept driving, didn't stop, didn't look back right away, just tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, just some guy out there for whatever reason. But then, I checked my mirror. He was still there. Same spot, same posture, not moving, watching. That should have been the end of it, just a strange moment on an empty road. But about 5 minutes later, headlights appeared behind me. That's not unusual by itself, but the way they appeared was sudden. There hadn't been any cars before, no turns, no side roads, nothing that explained where they came from. And yet, there they were, right behind me, holding a steady distance. I tried to ignore it at first, but something about the timing didn't sit right. I checked the mirror again, same distance, same speed, and then it hit me. They weren't trying to pass. The road was completely clear. If they wanted to go ahead, they could have done it easily, but they didn't. They just stayed there, following. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but that thought crept in anyway. Quiet, persistent. What if it's him? It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. And yet, the timing, the way those headlights appeared, something about it felt wrong. I pressed the gas slightly, just to test it, and they matched me, exactly. That's when the calm feeling disappeared completely. My hands tightened on the wheel, and suddenly the road didn't feel empty anymore. It felt controlled, like I wasn't alone on it anymore. Then the headlights behind me flashed. Once, then again, not like a warning, not like they were trying to pass, more like they wanted me to notice them. I didn't respond. I just kept driving, trying to act like I hadn't seen it, but my heart was already racing, that quiet unease turning into something sharper. Then they moved closer. Not fast, not aggressive, just enough to feel too close. And right when I was about to speed up again, the headlights behind me turned off. Just like that, gone. No light, no car, nothing in the mirror but darkness. And that's when the fear changed. Because now, I didn't know where they were. Were they still behind me, just without lights? Had they pulled off? Or were they getting closer, without me being able to see them? Who does that? Who drives on a pitch-black road with their headlights off, unless they don't want to be seen? I didn't slow down. I couldn't. I just kept driving, faster now, trying to get out of that stretch of road as quickly as possible, barely blinking, barely breathing. And then I saw something ahead that made everything worse. Another figure, standing on the side of the road, same posture, same stillness, facing the road. My chest tightened instantly. That wasn't possible. I hadn't turned, hadn't looped back. There was no way. But as I got closer, that same feeling came back, stronger this time, like I already knew what was about to happen. As my headlights hit him, he turned his head, slowly, and looked straight at me, and smiled. The same smile. I didn't slow down this time. I drove past him as fast as I could, my entire body tense, not even wanting to look. But I did anyway, just for a second. Nothing. No one behind me. No headlights. No figure. Just darkness. Like it had all disappeared. I didn't stop driving until I reached the city, until there were lights, other cars, something normal, something real. But even then, something didn't feel right, because I still don't understand what I saw that night. I don't know if it was the same person, or something else, and I definitely don't know how there could have been two of them, miles apart, on the same road. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, and the road gets a little too quiet, I catch myself looking to the side, just for a second, just to make sure there's no one standing there, waiting, watching, smiling, because if there is, I don't think I'll ever stop driving. Story 4. I keep my doors locked now, even during the day, which is something I never used to think about, because back then everything felt normal, safe even, and if you had asked me, I would have told you nothing like this could ever happen in a place like mine. I was living alone in a small rental house just outside Nashville, quiet neighborhood, friendly neighbors, nothing unusual, and for months everything was predictable, calm, until one night, something small happened, something I almost ignored. I came home late, tired, not really paying attention, just going through routine, unlocked the door, stepped inside, dropped my keys, and stood there for a second in the dark while my eyes adjusted. That's when I felt it, that hesitation, like something was off, not obvious, not something I could explain, just a feeling sitting in the back of my mind. I turned on the lights, and everything looked normal, exactly how I left it, at least at first. Then I noticed the chair at the dining table, slightly pulled out. It wasn't dramatic, just a few inches, but I always push it in, always, no exceptions. I stood there staring at it, trying to remember if I had left it like that. Maybe I was in a rush earlier. Maybe I forgot. That explanation made sense, or at least it tried to. I pushed it back in and moved on, but the feeling didn't leave. It stayed, quiet, waiting. I checked the house casually. Kitchen, living room, bathroom. Nothing seemed wrong, until I reached the bedroom and saw the closet door slightly open. Just a crack, and I knew I had closed it before I left. That's when my chest tightened a little. I told myself it was nothing. Air pressure. Maybe it didn't latch. Simple explanations, the kind you hold on to when something doesn't feel right. But I didn't open it immediately. I just stood there, staring at that gap, listening, because suddenly the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something was there with me. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I stepped closer, grabbed the handle, and opened the door quickly, expecting something, anything. But there was nothing, just clothes, shoes, exactly how they should be. I actually let out a small laugh at that point, the kind you give when you realize you scared yourself for no reason. I told myself it was stress, changed clothes, and tried to forget about it. But later that night, lying in bed, lights off, everything quiet, I heard it, a soft sound from the hallway. At first I thought it was the house settling, old wood, normal noises, but then it happened again, slightly clearer this time, a slow movement, like a footstep. I sat up instantly, completely still, listening, silence, then another sound, closer, not loud, not rushed, just careful, controlled, like someone was trying not to be heard. My heart started pounding, and that feeling from earlier came back, stronger now, undeniable. I got out of bed slowly, each movement feeling louder than it should, and walked toward the bedroom door, my hand hesitating on the handle. I still don't know why I didn't call anyone, why I didn't just leave, but I didn't. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, or at least it looked that way. I stepped out, scanning everything, living room, kitchen, nothing, no movement, no sound, and for a moment I almost convinced myself it was over, that I had imagined everything, until I saw the front door. It wasn't locked, it was slightly open, just enough to let in a thin line of darkness from outside. That didn't make sense. I always lock it, always, and if someone had broken in, why leave it like that? Why leave at all? And then the thought hit me, quiet but heavy, what if they hadn't left? I turned slowly, looking back toward the bedroom, toward the one place I hadn't checked again, the closet. I don't know what made me walk back, maybe instinct, maybe something worse, but I did. Slowly, every step felt heavier, the silence louder, until I stood in front of the closet door again. It was closed now, completely. I knew it hadn't been like that before. My hand hovered over the handle, and for a second, I almost didn't open it. But I had to know. I pulled it open slowly, carefully, and for a brief second, everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A shift, deep inside, like something had just moved further back into the darkness. That was enough. I didn't think. I didn't check again. I just backed away and ran out of the house, heart racing, not even grabbing anything, just out, into the street, into open air. I didn't go back that night, or the next. Eventually I moved out completely, but when I returned one last time during the day, with someone else, everything looked normal again. No signs of forced entry, nothing missing, nothing disturbed, except inside the closet, in the far corner, there was a space, not random, not accidental, a space that had clearly been used, just enough room for someone to stand and wait, without being seen. I never found out who it was, or how long they had been there, but one thing never left me after that night. Some doors don't keep people out, they just hide what's already inside. Story 5. I used to think daytime was safe, like whatever happens at night stays there, but after this, I stopped believing that completely, because what happened to me didn't start in the dark. It started in the middle of the day, in a place that felt completely normal. It was a Saturday afternoon in Denver, bright, busy, people everywhere, the kind of day where nothing feels threatening, and I had just finished grocery shopping, nothing unusual, just a routine trip, and I remember thinking how ordinary everything felt, how predictable, how safe. That's probably why I didn't notice him at first. He was just there, standing near the end of the parking lot, not doing anything obvious, not approaching anyone, just standing and watching. At least, that's what it felt like when I looked up and our eyes met for the first time. It wasn't aggressive, not threatening in an obvious way, just too focused. I looked away quickly, grabbed my bags, and started walking to my car, telling myself not to overthink it. People look at each other all the time, right? It doesn't mean anything. But then, as I reached my car and unlocked it, I felt it again. that same awareness, like I was being watched. I turned slightly, and he was closer now, not right next to me, but closer than before, close enough that it didn't feel like a coincidence. I hesitated for a second, keys still in my hand, trying to decide if I was just imagining things, but something about the way he was standing, still, facing me, it made my chest tighten, so I got into my car quickly and locked the doors. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't, because instead of walking away, he started moving toward me, slowly, not rushing, not calling out, just walking straight toward my car. Who does that? I started the engine immediately, hands tightening on the wheel, and pulled out of the spot without looking back again, just wanting to create distance, to get out of there. And for a moment, I thought that was enough. I drove out of the parking lot, merged onto the road, blended into traffic, normal, safe, nothing unusual, and I remember exhaling, thinking maybe I had just overreacted. But then, I saw the same car behind me. I didn't notice it leave the parking lot. I didn't see him get in, but somehow, it was there, right behind me, same lane, same speed. That's when the uneasiness came back, stronger this time, because now it didn't feel like a random encounter anymore. I made a turn. The car turned too. I told myself it didn't mean anything. People go the same direction all the time. But then I turned again, and so did they. Now my heart was starting to race, because at this point, it was obvious. They were following me. I tried to stay calm, telling myself not to panic, not to make it worse, but my thoughts were already spiraling. Where do I go? Do I go home? No, absolutely not. Do I stop somewhere public? Call someone? And then something even worse crossed my mind. What if they already knew where I lived? That thought hit harder than anything else, because if this wasn't random, then maybe it had never been random. I kept driving, taking turns I wouldn't normally take, trying to break the pattern, trying to lose them, but no matter what I did, they stayed behind me. Same distance, same pace, like they had nowhere else to be. Like this was the plan. I reached a red light and slowed down, my grip tightening on the wheel as I checked the mirror again. The car stopped behind me, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. Same man from the parking lot, same expression, calm, watching, not angry, not impatient, just waiting. And then, he smiled, that same quiet, unsettling smile, like he knew exactly what he was doing, and exactly what I was thinking. My stomach dropped, the light turned green, and I didn't hesitate. I drove straight through, faster this time, heading toward the busiest area I could think of, somewhere with people, with noise, with cameras, somewhere safe. But he didn't back off. He stayed with me, turn after turn, street after street, and at that point, I knew this wasn't going to stop on its own, so I made a decision. I pulled into a crowded shopping center, parked near the entrance, and got out immediately, not even looking back at first, just heading straight toward the doors, toward the people inside. And then I stopped, because something told me to look, just once. I turned around, and his car was parked a few spaces away, engine still running, and he was still inside, watching, not getting out, not leaving, just sitting there, like he was waiting for something, or someone. I went inside and stayed there for a long time, longer than I needed to, just walking around, pretending to shop, constantly checking the windows, trying to see if he was still there. And every time I looked, he was. Same spot, same stillness, same attention. Eventually, I called someone to come get me. I didn't go back to my car alone, and when we returned together, the car was gone. Just gone. No sign of it, no sign of him, like it had never been there. But here's the part that still doesn't make sense to me. A few days later, I was bringing groceries into my apartment, and I noticed something on my door. A small mark, right near the handle. Not damage, not forced, just a mark, like something had been placed there, or used. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out what it meant, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But deep down, I already knew, because that man, he didn't need to follow me anymore. He had already found me, and ever since that day, I don't just look behind me when I'm driving. I check my door, every single time. Story 6. I used to think the scariest situations were the obvious ones: dark streets, empty places, strangers acting strange. But what happened to me didn't feel dangerous at the beginning. It felt normal, almost friendly. And that's exactly why I didn't see it coming. It started at my workplace in Austin, a small office where everyone kind of knew each other, not too close, but enough to feel comfortable. And for the most part, it was routine, predictable, until a new guy joined. His name was Eric. At least, that's what he told everyone. At first, there was nothing off about him. Quiet, polite, kept to himself, the kind of coworker you barely notice. He didn't talk much, didn't join conversations, just did his job and left. And honestly, that didn't stand out. What did stand out was how often he seemed to notice me. Not in an obvious way, not staring, not anything you could call out directly, just small things. He'd hold eye contact a second too long. He'd show up in the break room right after I walked in. He'd be near my desk more often than necessary. At first, I ignored it. People have habits, patterns. It doesn't mean anything. But then, I started noticing something else. He always seemed to know when I was leaving. I never told anyone my exact schedule, especially not down to the minute. But somehow, he'd be there, packing up at the same time, walking out just a few steps behind me, not close enough to say anything, but close enough that I was aware of him. Every single time, that's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe our shifts just lined up. Maybe I was paying too much attention. But then one evening, I decided to test it. I stayed late, way later than usual, long enough that most people had already left. And for a while, nothing happened. The office was quiet, empty, normal again. And I remember thinking, see, it's nothing. But then, I heard a chair move, somewhere behind me. I turned slightly, and there he was, sitting at his desk, in the dark, not working, not moving, just sitting there, watching. My stomach dropped instantly. I hadn't seen him stay. I hadn't heard him before that. So how long had he been there, and why was he just sitting in the dark? I looked away quickly, pretending not to notice, trying to act normal, but my focus was gone. Every sound felt louder, every second stretched longer, and I could feel it, that same feeling, like I wasn't alone in a way I should be. I packed up quickly and stood up, trying not to rush, trying not to show anything, and as I walked toward the exit, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, measured, following. I didn't turn around, I didn't stop, I just kept walking, pushing the door open, stepping out into the parking lot, the cool air hitting me like relief. But it didn't last, because I heard the door open again behind me. He was still there. Of course he was. I walked faster, heading toward my car, keys already in my hand, trying to stay calm, telling myself not to panic, but my heart was already racing. Then I heard it. Hey, his voice, right behind me, closer than I expected. I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because I froze. Slowly, I turned around. He was standing there, just a few feet away, closer than he had ever been before, and he was smiling, that same calm, quiet smile. I didn't know you stayed this late, he said. Something about the way he said it, like he already knew, like he had been waiting for it. I forced a small response, something neutral, something quick, just enough to end the interaction, and turned back toward my car. But he didn't move. He just stood there, watching. I got inside, locked the doors immediately, and started the engine, and as I pulled out, I checked the mirror. He was still standing there, not leaving, not moving, just watching. That should have been the end of it, but the next morning, something happened that changed everything. I got to my desk, and there was a note, no envelope, no name, just a small piece of paper, and written on it, in simple handwriting, "You left earlier than usual." My chest tightened instantly, because I had stayed late, later than anyone else, except him. I looked around the office, scanning faces, trying to act normal, and then I saw him, at his desk, already there, looking at me, and when our eyes met, he smiled, that same smile, like nothing was wrong, like this was all normal. I never stayed late again after that. I changed my schedule, avoided him as much as possible, kept conversations short, distant, but it didn't matter, because somehow he always knew. When I arrived, when I left, when I left, when I was alone. And the worst part, I never figured out how. Eventually, I reported it. HR got involved, and just like that, he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone, like he had never been there. But a few days later, as I was leaving work, I noticed something on my car, a small piece of paper tucked under the windshield. My hands were already shaking before I even picked it up, because deep down, I already knew. It said, "See you tomorrow," but he didn't work there anymore, and he never showed up again. At least, not where I could see him, but sometimes, when I'm leaving work, and I feel that same awareness, that same quiet presence just behind me, I don't turn around anymore. Story 7. I used to think ignoring someone who needs help makes you a bad person, like if someone's asking for assistance, especially late at night, the least you can do is stop and check. But after that night, I don't think that way anymore, because sometimes the worst thing you can do is stop. It happened while I was driving back home late one night, just outside Charlotte. The roads mostly empty, just the occasional car passing by, nothing unusual, and I remember feeling tired but alert, focused on getting home, not really expecting anything out of the ordinary. And then I saw her. She was standing on the side of the road, waving her arms, trying to get someone's attention. At first I slowed down automatically. It's instinct, right? Someone looks like they need help. You don't just ignore it. She looked normal enough, mid-20s maybe, casual clothes, nothing threatening, just out of place. That was the first thing that didn't sit right, because there was nothing around, no houses, no stores, no broken down car, nothing. So why was she there? I slowed down more, just enough to roll the window slightly, keeping the door locked, and asked if she was okay. She stepped closer, a little too quickly, and that's when I noticed something in her expression. She wasn't panicked, she wasn't scared, she was calm, too calm. "I just need a ride," she said. Her voice was steady, almost rehearsed. I hesitated, because something about that didn't match the situation. If you're stranded in the middle of nowhere at night, you don't sound like that. You sound desperate, you sound worried, but she didn't. She just stood there, waiting. That's when I glanced past her, and my stomach dropped. There was movement in the darkness behind her. At first, I thought I imagined it, just shadows shifting, but then I saw it again, a figure, standing further back, just out of reach of my headlights, not moving, watching. I looked back at her instantly, and for a split second, her expression changed, just slightly, like she knew I had seen it. That's when everything in my body told me to leave. Now, I didn't say anything else. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded quickly, rolled the window up, and pressed the gas. And that's when she ran toward the car. Not after me, not chasing, but just a quick step forward, like she had been expecting me to stop longer, like she was about to do something. I didn't wait to find out what. I drove, faster than I should have, and for a moment, I thought that was it. Just a strange encounter, something to forget. But then, I checked my mirror, and I saw headlights behind me, close, too close. I hadn't seen a car there before, not when I stopped, not when I slowed down. So where did it come from, and why was it already so close? I pressed the gas harder, trying to create distance, but the car stayed with me. Same speed, same lane, not passing, not falling back, following. That's when it hit me. The figure, the one standing in the dark, they hadn't been alone. I made a turn. The car turned too. Another turn. Still there. At this point, my heart was pounding so hard, it felt like I couldn't think straight. Every decision felt urgent. Every second mattered, and the road ahead felt longer than it should have. Then the headlights behind me flashed. Once, then again. Not aggressive, not impatient, just enough to get my attention, like they wanted me to notice. I didn't respond. I just kept driving. But then something even worse happened. The car behind me got closer, slowly, deliberately, until it was right behind me. And then, it matched my speed exactly. I could feel it. That pressure, that presence. And for a second, I considered something I shouldn't have. What if I had just given her a ride? That thought hit hard, because suddenly, it felt like I had just avoided something I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I drove straight toward the nearest gas station I could remember, lights in the distance becoming the only thing I focused on, the only thing that felt safe. And as soon as I pulled in, the car behind me didn't follow. It kept going, just passed right by, like I was no longer worth it. I sat there for a minute, hands shaking, trying to process what just happened, trying to convince myself it was coincidence, that I was connecting things that weren't connected. But deep down, I knew, because when I looked back toward the road, for just a second, I thought I saw something. A figure, standing near where the darkness started, watching the gas station, waiting. I didn't stay long. I went straight home after that, checked every lock twice, didn't sleep much that night. And the next morning, I tried to convince myself it was over, until I saw something that made my stomach drop again. Mud. On the side of my car, near the passenger door. Fresh, like someone had stepped close, very close, close enough to touch it. And suddenly, that moment replayed in my head, the way she stepped forward, the way I hesitated, the way I almost unlocked the door. If I had waited 1 second longer, if I had opened that door, I don't think I would have been driving away alone. And ever since that night, I don't stop anymore. Not for anyone. Not in the dark. Because some people don't need you to trust them. They just need you to hesitate for 1 second, and that's all it takes. Story 8. I don't stay in hotels the same way anymore. I don't walk in casually, don't drop my bags and relax like I used to. Because once you've had that feeling, that quiet, creeping realization that something isn't right, you start noticing things you never paid attention to before. Small things, details that don't add up. And by the time you realize what they mean, it's already too late. This happened during a work trip to Chicago, just a short overnight stay, nothing unusual, the kind of trip I had done dozens of times before, same routine, same process, nothing that should have stood out. I checked in late, sometime after 10 p.m., tired from traveling, not really focused on anything except getting to my room and sleeping. The lobby was quiet, almost empty, just a couple of people sitting off to the side, and the front desk clerk greeted me with a polite smile. Normal, routine, except for one thing. He hesitated, just for a second, when he handed me the key card and told me my room number. There was this pause, small enough that most people wouldn't notice, but it was there, like he was about to say something else, something he decided not to say. I didn't question it. I should have. The hallway upstairs was long and unusually quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavier than it should, like sound gets absorbed before it can travel. And my room was at the very end, far from the elevator, far from everything. I remember noticing that, how isolated it felt, how empty the entire floor seemed. But again, I ignored it. I opened the door, stepped inside, and at first, everything looked normal. Bed made, lights off, nothing out of place. I locked the door behind me, dropped my bag, and did a quick scan of the room out of habit. Bathroom, closet, under the bed, nothing. At least, nothing obvious. But then something small caught my attention. The bathroom light was already on, not fully bright, just dim, like it had been left that way intentionally. I stood there for a moment, trying to remember if I had turned it on without thinking, but I hadn't even stepped in yet. I told myself it was housekeeping. That explanation made sense. It had to. I walked into the bathroom, and that's when I noticed the sink. It was wet, not dripping, not freshly running, but damp enough that it hadn't dried yet. I reached out and touched it, cool, but not dry, and suddenly, that quiet unease started to build, because if housekeeping had just been there, why didn't they turn off the light? Why leave it like that? I stepped back into the main room, telling myself I was overthinking it, that it didn't mean anything, but the feeling didn't leave. It stayed there, subtle, persistent, like something just beneath the surface. I turned on the TV for background noise, something to break the silence, and started unpacking a few things, trying to settle in, but then I noticed something else. My suitcase. It wasn't where I left it, not by much, just a slight shift, a few inches at most. but I was sure I had placed it closer to the wall. I stared at it, trying to recall. Did I move it already? Without thinking? Maybe when I walked in? But I couldn't remember doing that. And that's when the thought came back. Stronger this time. What if someone had been here recently? I checked the room again, more carefully this time. Opened drawers, checked behind the curtains, even looked under the bed again. Nothing. Everything looked normal. So why didn't it feel normal? I locked the door again, even though it was already locked, checked the handle twice, then sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm down, telling myself I was just tired. But then I heard something, a faint sound, behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing, just the room, still, silent. I stood there, listening, trying to catch it again, but nothing came. I told myself it was the TV, or the building, or something from another room, but deep down, it didn't feel like that. It felt closer. I turned off the TV, and that's when the silence became heavier, more noticeable. I could hear everything now, the air, the faint hum of electricity, my own breathing. And then, there it was again, a soft, almost inaudible sound, like movement, inside the room. I froze, completely still, listening, waiting, and then it stopped, just like that. Gone. I didn't move for a few seconds, maybe longer, just standing there, trying to decide what to do, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Eventually, I turned the TV back on. I needed noise, something normal, something to hold on to. I kept the lights on longer than I usually would, but eventually, exhaustion took over. I turned them off and laid down, but I didn't sleep, not right away. Every sound felt amplified, every shift in the building felt closer, and that feeling that something wasn't right didn't go away. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up suddenly, no reason, no sound, just awake, and for a moment, everything was still. Then I noticed something, the bathroom light. It was off. I was certain I had left it on. My chest tightened instantly, because that meant something had changed. While I was asleep, I sat up slowly, staring into the darkness, trying to listen, trying to understand, and then I heard it, breathing, not mine, soft, slow, somewhere in the room. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just listened, trying to figure out where it was coming from. And then, it stopped, completely, like it had never been there. I reached for my phone slowly, turned on the flashlight, and scanned the room. Nothing, no one, everything looked normal, except the closet door. It was slightly open, just enough to notice, and I knew I had closed it. I got out of bed slowly, every step careful, every movement controlled, my heart pounding louder with each second, and walked toward it. I didn't want to open it, but I had to. I pulled the door open. Nothing. Empty. Just clothes, shoes, exactly as they should be. I stood there for a moment, trying to breathe, trying to calm down, trying to convince myself I had imagined everything, until I looked down, at the floor, inside the closet. There were marks, faint but clear, like someone had been standing there, not hours ago, recently. I didn't sleep after that. I turned on every light, sat in the chair, watched the door, waited for morning, and as soon as the sun came up, I left. No questions, no explanations, just left. But here's the part that stayed with me, the part I can't explain. As I was leaving, I passed the front desk again, and the same clerk was there. He looked at me, paused, just like before, and then he said something quietly. "Did you enjoy your stay?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, because something about the way he said it felt different, like he already knew. I left without responding, and I never went back. But sometimes I think about that room, that silence, that breathing, and I keep coming back to one question. If the door was locked, if no one came in, then who was already there? And more importantly, how long had they been waiting? Story 9. I didn't notice it the first day, and that's what bothers me the most, because if I had noticed it earlier, if I had paid attention to the small things instead of brushing them off, maybe I wouldn't still be thinking about it now. Maybe I wouldn't still be questioning what was real and what wasn't. It started after I moved into a new apartment in Seattle. Nothing unusual about the place, just a standard unit in an older building, quiet neighborhood, decent rent, the kind of place you take without thinking too much about it. The first few days were normal, unpacking, getting settled, learning the layout, building that sense of familiarity that makes a place feel like yours. But then, small things started happening. At first it was so minor I didn't even question it. I'd leave something on the kitchen counter, and later it would be slightly out of place. Not missing, not moved far, just different. A mug turned the other way, keys not exactly where I left them, the kind of thing you explain away instantly. I told myself I was just distracted, still adjusting. That made sense, until it kept happening. Not every day, not enough to feel obvious, but just enough to stay in the back of my mind. And every time I noticed it, I'd pause for a second, trying to remember exactly how I left things, trying to convince myself I was just misremembering. But then one night, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I came home late, later than usual, the building quiet, almost too quiet, and as I unlocked my door, I felt it, that same hesitation, like something wasn't right. I stepped inside, turned on the light, and everything looked normal. At first, then I noticed the window. It was slightly open, just a few inches, and I knew I had closed it before I left. My chest tightened immediately, because that wasn't something you forget, not in an apartment, not on the second floor. I walked over slowly, checked the latch. It wasn't broken, it hadn't been forced, it was just open. I closed it, locked it, and stood there for a moment, trying to think logically. Maybe I didn't shut it properly, maybe it slipped, maybe I was overthinking again, but something about it didn't feel right, and that feeling didn't leave. That night, I double-checked everything, doors, windows, locks, more carefully than I ever had before. Everything was secure, everything was fine. At least, it looked that way. I went to bed, trying to shake it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid, but sleep didn't come easily. Every small sound felt louder, every creak felt closer, and at some point, I realized something that made my heart start to race. I couldn't remember if I had checked the closet. That thought shouldn't have mattered, but it did, because suddenly, the room didn't feel empty anymore. I sat up slowly, staring into the darkness, listening, trying to hear anything, but there was nothing, just silence. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling, so I got up, slowly, carefully, walked to the closet, and opened it. Nothing, just clothes. Exactly as expected. I stood there for a moment, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, and told myself again, it's nothing. It has to be nothing. But the next morning, I noticed something that made that explanation harder to believe. There was a glass on the kitchen counter, filled with water. I didn't leave it there. I was sure of that. I don't drink water at night like that. And even if I did, I would remember. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I should have, trying to come up with any explanation that made sense, but none of them did. That's when the thought changed. It wasn't maybe I forgot anymore. It was, what if someone else is here? I checked everything again, more thoroughly this time. Closet, bathroom, under the bed, every corner, nothing. Still nothing. But that didn't help, because now, the absence of evidence didn't feel reassuring. It felt worse, like something was just out of sight. That night, I didn't turn the lights off. I left everything on, sat in the living room, tried to stay awake, but eventually, exhaustion won, and I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up again, suddenly, same as before, no sound, no reason, just awake, and for a moment, everything felt normal, until I noticed something, the bedroom door. It was closed. I was certain I had left it open. My heart started pounding immediately, because that meant something had changed. Again, I didn't move right away. I just stared at the door, trying to listen, trying to understand, and then I heard it. A soft sound, from inside the bedroom, not loud, not sudden, just movement, slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. I froze, completely still, every instinct telling me not to open that door, but at the same time, I needed to know. I stood up slowly, each step heavier than the last. until I reached the handle. My hand hovered there for a second, and then I turned it. The door opened, slowly, and the room looked normal. At first, bed, closet, nothing out of place, nothing moving, nothing there. But then I noticed something that made everything stop. The closet door. It was open, wider than before, and inside, the clothes were slightly shifted, like something had moved through them, recently. I didn't go closer. I didn't check again. I didn't need to, because at that point, I understood something I hadn't wanted to accept before. This wasn't random. This wasn't in my head, and whatever it wasn't leaving. I packed what I could the next day, left the apartment, didn't stay another night, didn't go back alone, but when I returned later with someone else, everything looked normal, perfectly normal. No signs, no evidence, nothing, except for one thing. Inside the closet, on the back wall, there was a mark, faint, scratched into the surface, not deep, but clear enough to read. 3 lines, stacked vertically, like someone had been counting, and suddenly everything made sense in a way I didn't want it to, because those weren't random marks, they were tallies, and if that was true, then that meant I wasn't the first, and I probably wasn't the last. I don't know who was in that apartment, I don't know how they got in, and I don't know how long they had been there before I noticed, but one thing I've never been able to shake is the feeling that they weren't hiding from me, they were just waiting for me to realize I wasn't alone. Story 10. I still think about that night more than I'd like to admit. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I didn't see, and how close I might have been to something without ever realizing it, until it was already over. It happened during a late-night rideshare trip in Los Angeles, one of those nights where everything feels normal, just another routine ride, nothing unusual, nothing memorable. At least, that's how it started. I had requested a ride a little after midnight, not too late for that city, and within a few minutes, I got matched. The car pulled up exactly where the app said it would. Everything looked normal. Driver sitting inside, headlights on, nothing that stood out. I got in, said a quick hello, and the ride began. At first, nothing felt off. The driver didn't talk much, which I didn't mind. Some drivers are quiet, some are chatty. This one just kept to himself. The route looked normal on the app. Traffic was light, everything moving smoothly. But then, something small caught my attention. He missed a turn, not by much, just enough for the app to reroute. That happens. Drivers make mistakes. I didn't think much of it, but then he missed another one, and this time, it didn't feel like a mistake, because he didn't react. No apology, no explanation, just kept driving. That's when I checked the map more carefully. The route had changed. Not drastically, but enough to feel wrong. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see his face through the rearview mirror, and that's when I noticed something that made my chest tighten. He wasn't looking at the road the way most people do. He kept glancing at me. Not long, not obvious, just quick looks, like he was checking something, or waiting. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he was just making sure I was comfortable. Maybe it meant nothing. But that explanation didn't sit right. Then the car slowed down, not because of traffic, not because of a stop sign, just slowed, gradually, like he was deciding something. Is this the right way? I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer right away, just kept driving. Then after a few seconds, he said, "Yeah," but something about the way he said it, flat, delayed, like he hadn't expected me to ask, made everything worse. I checked the map again. We weren't on the fastest route anymore. We weren't even on a main road. That's when the unease turned into something sharper, because now, I couldn't explain it away. I looked outside. The streets were quieter, darker, less traffic, fewer lights, and suddenly, it didn't feel like a normal ride anymore. It felt controlled, like I wasn't the one deciding where this was going. I gripped my phone tighter, pretending to check something, but really, I was watching him, watching his hands, his movements, trying to understand if this was intentional. And then, he turned off the main road completely, onto a smaller street. No cars, no people, just houses and darkness. My heart started pounding. "Hey, I think you missed the turn," I said, a little firmer this time. Again, no immediate response, just silence. Then, "It's a shortcut." That word, shortcut. It didn't feel right. Not at that time. Not in that place. Not with everything else. I checked the app again. There was no shortcut. At least, not one that made sense. That's when I made a decision. I shared my ride, sent my live location, didn't tell him, just quietly did it. And for the first time since the ride started, I felt a little more in control. But then something happened that changed everything. The car slowed again, more this time, almost to a stop. And then he pulled over, on a street with no lights, no movement, nothing. My entire body tensed. "Why are we stopping?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just sat there, hands on the wheel, looking straight ahead, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. And in that moment, everything felt wrong. Every instinct told me the same thing. Get out, now. But I didn't move immediately, because I didn't know what he would do. And then, he turned his head, slowly, looked at me, and smiled. Not friendly, not reassuring, just quiet, controlled. And that was enough. I unlocked the door and stepped out immediately, not waiting, not asking, just out, closing the door behind me, heart racing. As I stepped back onto the sidewalk, for a second, nothing happened. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just sat there, watching. Then, without a word, he drove away, slowly, like nothing had happened. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to process, trying to understand what just happened. And then I looked around, and that's when I realized something. I wasn't near my destination, not even close. I had no idea where I was. The street was unfamiliar, too quiet, too empty. And suddenly, a new thought hit me. If I hadn't gotten out, where would he have taken me? I ordered another ride after that, got home safely, everything normal again. But the next day, something didn't sit right. So I checked the app, looked at the trip history, the driver, the route, everything, except the trip wasn't there. No record, no driver, nothing, like it never happened. I contacted support, tried to report it, but without a trip, there was nothing to report. No proof, no trace, nothing. And that's the part that stayed with me, because if it wasn't logged, if it wasn't recorded, then what did I get into that night? And how many times has that happened before? I still use ride shares sometimes, but I check everything now. The driver, the plate, the route, every detail.